Good morning, everybody. How are we this morning? Now, I will let you know I have ADHD, which means two things. One, I sometimes talk really fast. The other thing is that I will tend to move a lot. But I understand that we are streaming, so I'll try to keep it somewhere inside the visible field. Okay, all right. How are we doing this morning? Are we blessed this morning? I love the fact that you all worship Jesus the way you all worship. If you look around for just a brief moment, and you even look at the people who are singing and playing their instruments up here, it's just merely a taste of what heaven's going to look like. Because as you're worshiping God, we are mere reflections of his image. And your image bears his likeness, and my image bears his likeness. And when we're worshiping together, he fills this place. Because this place will go away, but this place is what needs to be filled. And I just love the way that you guys do that. Thank you so much for being expressive in your worship. I am admittedly one of those types of people who likes to worship, and I generally sit by myself because I believe that praise and worship is a full body contact sport. Come on. And I'm not above throwing a bit of a fist or an elbow, get a little throat punch in there, because he inhabits the praises of his people. And the spiritual world trembles when the voices of his children rise up before his throne. The darkness of this world cannot stand. So thank you for being a worshipful, praising people. Now, Pastor didn't pay me to say that. That was free, just kind of before we get started. But I do want to say, Pastor, thank you very much for the invitation to be able to stand here. I treat the pulpit with honor. And the fact that your pastor loves you so much, I know pastors, they're jealous of their pulpit time. And anytime they are willing to hand the microphone over to somebody else, it means that he trusts them enough to do so. So thank you for that implicit trust, and I will endeavor not to abuse it. He's given me about an hour. I'll try to only take about 25 or 30, trust me. We'll beat the Baptist to lunch if I'm any good at this. I have a message for you all. One that I've called networking. And if you have your Bibles with you, I would like for you to take a time to go with me to Luke chapter 5. Now, this scripture passage is one that is familiar to us all. In fact, you've probably heard other missionaries use this very same passage for a variety of things. So this is not going to be unfamiliar, but I want to kind of take time to look at the first 11 verses real briefly. And we're not going to go through verse by verse. In fact, we'll skip around a little bit. But when you get there, just give me a little wave so I know that you're with me. Okay, all right. So there's some things here that you need to know before I start reading the scriptures. One, when I close my eyes, I have no ability to see anything in my imagination. When I close my eyes, all I get is blank blackness. So when I'm reading the scripture, I can't imagine what's going on. I have to tell myself stories to interact, narrative, to kind of involve myself. And so I was reading this, and it says he saw two boats lying at the edge of the lake, but the fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets. And when he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little distance from the land. He sat down and continued teaching the crowds from the boat. So what's happening here is, okay, you've got this man, and he's got this crowd pressing, and the lake's behind him, and he's backing up, and then suddenly the heels of his sandals, he starts to feel the water kind of lapping on the back of his heels. So he gets into a boat. And when he finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon responded and said, "Master, we've worked hard all night and caught nothing." Now, I like Peter, and I imagine he kind of is like me, a little bit not very well spoken, probably had ADHD as well. He's kind of a rough and tumble dude. And I have to imagine that in his head, at this point, he's kind of going, I got this strange, bearded, Middle Eastern man coming onto my boat. I've worked all night long. He doesn't smell like me. He doesn't talk like me. I'm a fisherman. I've lived all my life in the fishing community. In fact, he kind of talks like those uppity carpenter people who work with wood up on the hill. Who is he to tell me where to go fish? I've been fishing my lake all my life on this lake. I know this lake inside and out. How can he tell me this? This is what I imagine he's thinking. But what he says is, "I will do as you say and let down the nets." Now, to me, this is an interesting thing. To be able to say all of these thoughts in my head, and yet with my mouth say, "Okay, you know what? Not my will, but your will. I'll do what you say." I might have all these doubts in my head, but I'm going to trust you, and I'll do what you say. And when they'd done this, they caught a great quantity of fish, and their nets began to tear. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats to the point that they were sinking. Now, here's something I want to stress. How many of you all like to fish? Anybody here? We got one, two. Okay, you all like to fish. I tried to learn how to fish. My grandmother, short Filipino woman, 4'9", late 80s, got an article in a magazine for catching one of the largest salmons off the pier in Edmonds. Wow. She tried to teach me how to fish. I was nearly arrested for loitering, hanging around with a fishing pole, not doing anything. I can't fish, but I love to crab. She also taught me how to take a ring and crab. And when I was first learning, I was so excited. I had my ring, went to the pier, got it ready. I tossed it out there, waited, nothing. Second time, I tossed my ring out there, waited, nothing. The third time I tossed my ring out there, someone stopped me and told me I needed to put a rope on it so I could bring it back. And it wasn't until the fourth time I learned I'm supposed to actually put bait on it so that the crab want to actually come to the ring. But I have never fished for crab so much that my nets were tearing. That would be a glorious sight to see, but it's never happened to me to this day. For these, you have to understand what kind of nets and boats they were using. I was kind of surprised when I was looking at this message. I always thought, okay, a dinghy, a small boat. I learned that each of these boats were 28 foot long and about 8.5 feet wide. I live in a trailer that's 28 feet long, 8.5 feet wide. It looked like an RV on the water. I don't live in there anymore because I just sold it, thank God. But each of these boats could carry about 1,000 pounds of fish apiece. And they were so full the nets were tearing and the boats were sinking, and you have Peter and his partner going and yelling across the lake to his other partners, "Hey, you all, come here, help, we're sinking." They came between the two of them, took in more fish than they'd ever seen in their lifetime. Later on, we see that when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." And later on in the same passage, we see that Jesus says, "Hey, from here on in, I'm going to make you fishers of men." But I think this is a beautiful imagery of missions and church. Because you see, in my opinion, missions is a team sport. You have missionaries who are saying, "Hey, around the world, the nets, they're breaking. The boats are full. Church, will you come help partner with us? Grab it." And a church in Angle Lake is saying, "We got you." To the point where you're sending like Ericansons and you say, "Hey, we got the net on this line. You all go to Ethiopia, and between us, we'll catch souls." For the Rodleys in Thailand, you're saying, "Hey, go off into Thailand. We got you on this end. You get it on that other end, and between us, we'll catch souls." And all the other missionaries locally and globally, and you are creating a network of people willing to work the nets so that between us, the catch that we present before the King will be greater than anything you've ever seen in your own lifetime. Because you might not even see the souls that you are participating by sending missionaries both locally and globally. Back in the late 1700s, there was a well-known missionary by the name of William Carey. And he was heading to India on a cruise ship, very different than the cruise ships that leave Seattle. And he was walking to the pier with his friend, who he wasn't going to see maybe ever again. He was telling him a story about a man who stood in front of a dark, black hole, took a rope out, tied it around his middle waist, turned to his friend and said, "If you hold this end, I'll go down there." Church, this is what you are saying to missionaries. The missionaries that you choose to adopt, you are saying, "We will hold the rope if you'll go down there." Life is strange. There's always twists and turns. I didn't grow up wanting to be a missionary. In fact, I was born in Seattle, right there on Pill Hill in Virginia Mason. I came from a Christian family. I was born on Saturday. I was in church on Sunday. That was my dad's rules. At 4 years old, I made the decision to move my family to Tennessee. My dad wanted to get a further education with a master's in sociology. So we moved to Tennessee, which means that I have a bit of a southern accent sometimes. When I get real tired, it'll come out. You'll hear my southern drawl. I like my biscuits hot. I like my tea sweet. In fact, if you give me unsweetened tea, I say it's not finished. Do something about that. When we were in Tennessee, my dad finished up his master's. We had a man come to our church to share about the mission field in South America. And he told my pastor, "I'm looking for a man who's called to missions, can teach sociology, and loves God with all his heart." And my pastor said, "I know exactly who you're looking for, and you can't have him. I need him in my church. Him and his family are doing great things here in my church. I don't want them to go, but you're looking for the Mills family." And so he sat down over one Friday dinner with his family and my family and laid out what was going on. And we went back to our house, and my dad sat me and my sister down and said, "We believe we're being called to the mission field. But we want you two to pray and see if you're called as well. Because we're either called as a family or we don't go at all." Because my dad firmly believed that we are not supposed to sacrifice our children on the altar of ministry. And so we prayed, my sister and I, independently. I can't tell you that I had an amazing vision or suddenly spoke another language. All I did was say, "Yes, I will go." So did my sister. And at 10 years old, I moved to a whole other country in South America. I already thought I was in the deep south. We went way south. I didn't even speak the language. In fact, in the 90s, there was a commercial where a dog advertising bad fast food, pseudo-Mexican Chihuahua spoke better Spanish than I did. But I learned. 10 years I was on the mission field as a missionary pastor's kid. That's right, I'm double trouble. No need to clap. I know Pastor felt a disturbance in the force when I walked in. Something you should understand about missionary pastor kids, particularly missionary kids, because you have a few that you've already adopted. They aren't kids of missionaries. They are missionaries who are kids. My dad worked me. He knew how to work me. He didn't allow us to just sit around. I was moving brick for construction teams, sifting sand for concrete. I was 13 years old, learning how to move a pile of bricks from there to over there to finally up there where they needed them. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't we just move them up there to begin with? By the time I was 19, I became a youth pastor. God did some amazing, miraculous things. By the time that I was 20, I told God I wanted to come back to the States. I was done being a missionary. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to come back and go to school, go to college, get an education, a good job, find a house with a picket fence, a wife, 2.6 kids, a cat, and a dog. And he said, okay. And so I left. I got my education. I had a lot of different jobs. I got my degree in Spanish. I cheated. I already spoke the language, so it wasn't really that hard. I got minors in psychology and Bible. But while I was there, I learned, because I'm a nerd, I let my geek flag fly, I'm okay with it. I worked for the help desk for the college and learned how to fix computers. I worked at the public library teaching computers to patrons, basics. A number of jobs, including one job where I was working for a company that was bringing the first television over internet to the United States. They were a Christian company. They would broadcast out called Sky Angel. And I worked in their operations center where half my job was to sit in this tiny dark room like a little veal and watch 60 live channels of television for audiovisual quality control, all of them Christian. And let me tell you, when you get 17 televangelists side by side, it gets really weird in the room. The other half of my job was to take something called beta tape. Most of you are probably too young to know what beta tape is. Beta tape was the rival for something called VHS. If you don't know what VHS is, this is something that predates CDs and DVDs. And if you don't know what that is, you're probably not old enough. But I will give it to you this way. VHS had better marketing. Beta tape has a better product. Kind of like Apple and Android. Apple has better marketing. Android has a better product. I know, I'm going to get some hate from the fan people out there. I get it. It's okay. My job was to take beta tape for 4 hours a day and digitalize it so that we could broadcast it online. I got done with that job and I thought, I'm getting older. I'm about to turn 30. I should probably maybe go back to Seattle. See if I can live there. I want to live in the city, mix it up. Be young and hip. So I returned like a salmon swimming upstream. And I thought, this is going to be it. I'm going to find the job. I'm going to get the house downtown. Of course, I didn't understand marketing back then. I didn't understand the housing market. I'm going to get the wife, the 1.8 kids, the cat and the dog. And so I came out here. My parents came out with me because they were in the middle of things. Worked at a job for about 3 years, and then it was crushing my soul because I'm a fix-it person, and I was working for a telephone company where you would call up with your needs, called 211, and every day you're just hearing about people who are experiencing these life-altering, horrible things, and I'm a fix-it person. And I can't fix it. So I left that job, and I'm looking for a new one, and my dad says, well, while you're applying, why don't you apply to become a missionary with the Assemblies of God, or at least, a missionary associate or something. I go, thank you, Dad. I've already had that conversation with God, and I'm not interested. Haha, thank you very much. And he said, well, why don't you do it anyway? Now, I'm a big believer in honoring my parents. And so I did that. I put my application in. Wouldn't you believe it? It's the only application that came back with a yes. And it never fails to surprise me how oftentimes in my life the voice of God sounds like my father. And so I went again to Uruguay, which is in South America. Some of you probably are more familiar with like Uruguay or Uruguay. I worked down there for about a year, making slideshows for the professor who was teaching master's level theology across the Latin American Caribbean. I had to read all their books and then make over 1,000 slides for his classes. I still maintain they owe me an honorary master's degree for all the work I did, but they don't agree. Okay. By the time I was getting done with that, halfway through, I was like, God, okay, I'm kind of digging this whole missions thing again, but if you don't show me what the next step is, we'll go back to the original plan. I'll go back to the States, I'll, find a job, get an apartment, find the wife, get the 1.2 kids. My dad's a sociologist. I did say that, right? Sociology and anthropology. Birth rates are going down worldwide. And he's like, okay, that's one plan, but my plan, how about you look around and see what's out there? Okay. So I began looking in South America because I speak Spanish. They weren't looking for someone with my skill set with technology. Everywhere was looking for two types of people. They wanted church planters. I love pastors. They do an awesome job. I love church planting. I'm not called to be a planter, and I'm not called to be a pastor. It's not my forte. It's not my bag. The other one that they were looking for was a children's coordinator, and I love children for about 5 minutes. And then you send them home hyped up on caffeine and chocolate. So God's like, okay, well, where else in the world could you go? I go, well, The Philippines, I've got family heritage there. My grandmother was Visayan, she's Filipina, so maybe they kind of sort of speak Spanish. Maybe the language wouldn't be too hard to get a hold of. Okay, well, where else in the world? Why don't you look in Europe? God, where in Europe do they speak Spanish? Oh, right, Spain, the motherland. And I get on there, and they are looking for somebody who can take beta tape and digitalize it. God, I can do that. So I go. My boss finds out that not only am I skilled in that, but I do IT work. I am a logistics coordinator. I speak Spanish at a higher level than most of her incoming people. For 2 years, I worked in Spain, and I haven't touched a single beta tape the entire time I was there, trying to do everything else my boss wanted me to do. And we get to do some amazing things at International Media Ministries. We've been around for over 40 years. We broadcast the gospel, messages of hope, parables of Jesus, the love of God across 7 different satellites, North Africa, Middle East, parts of Asia, all of Europe. 2 of our satellites are currently reaching over 10 million people every month, eyes on screen. We also stream online to countries that are closed to the gospel. We are seeing right now, on average, a soul a day being won on the online streaming platforms. And you might say to me, Sean, a soul a day isn't very much. True, but it's still one less for hell and one more for heaven, and I'll make that trade any day. It's amazing what we can do. We had one guy who was planning a church in a sensitive region, and he thought he was going to have to go in there, grassroots, knock on doors. He arrived, and we gave him a list of 6,000 people who were interested in knowing more about Jesus, who had contacted us because they'd seen Jesus on their television screen, and they'd been dreaming about him in their dreams, and they wanted to know more about this man who gave them hope and life, healing. 3,000 of those names ended up being viable. Now, pastor's just walking out the door, but I would ask him if he went to a new place and was handed a list of 3,000 names of people who were interested, how excited would he be? We get to do this for Jesus. Like I said, I'm a nerd, an absolute geek. I make tiny computers that are battery operated, that broadcast the gospel up to 60 feet away on its own Wi-Fi network with no need for internet. All battery operated, fits in your pocket. This is a computer. We can put this in the hands of people. I can put up to 5 different languages, Bibles, and film content, and people from their cell phones looking for a free Wi-Fi signal can then access this and begin to download or stream the content from this computer. And you never even know it's there. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The gospel message doesn't change, but the way we transmit it has to change. My message for young people, the things that you are passionate about, the things that you love to do, learn them well because God can use that on the mission field. He did me that way too. I loved acting. I loved nerdy things since I was a little kid in movies, and I wanted to be an actor, and my dad said, you're never going to make money that way. But guess what? I make computers that broadcast the love of God. I got to act in one of our films. God is putting my passions to work. One of the things that we're getting to do this year is tell the story of a little-known woman in the Bible named Esther. Anybody familiar with Esther? She's not very well known, I understand. We get the opportunity to work with a woman, and because we are streaming live I can't say names. But one morning she was in her country, Christian woman, well known. There's a knock on her door. It's the religious police, and they come to haul her away. She's imprisoned for 9 months. 4 of those months are spent in solitary confinement. 9 of those months, she was abused and tortured. To this day, she still can't sleep in a locked, dark room. They released her, said, don't talk anymore about Jesus. She met up with a group who said, we can get you out of here by erasing your name in the system for 15 minutes. You just have to make it through airport security, and if you get caught, we don't know you, you don't know us. Now, I don't know how many of you have traveled recently, but getting through TSA in 15 minutes is a miracle in its own right. She made it through. We got in contact with her, and she said, my people in this country still love Queen Esther. She's our queen. But my people have forgotten why we consider her to be our most beautiful queen of history. And so we're doing 6 episodic stories of Queen Esther and how she gave hope for 2 different nations, saved them. And this country is in turmoil and they need hope. And we get to tell that story and put it back into their language, into their country. See, we work with over 80 different languages right now and are growing. Different content, different ways of reaching people for the gospel. Don't worry, I'm going to land the plane right about now. Come to a close here. I'd like to close with a little joke. It's an old joke. And if you've heard it before, don't stop me. Just enjoy it. There were 2 little boys. And they were troublemakers in the church. Not this church. I know all of your kids are absolute angels. This was the Lutheran church up the road. And one day the pastor was just sick of it, and he wanted to just put the fear of God in them. And so he brought him into his office, sat him down, leaned over his desk, pointed to the oldest and said, where's God? And the boys just sat there, eyes big as saucers. Pastor, I'm getting into them, getting through. I get this. Where's God? And at that point, the oldest brother grabbed the little one by the hand and took off running down the hallway. The little one said, what's going on? The oldest one said, I don't know, but they've lost God and they're trying to blame us. But you see, that same question of where is God is being asked by 43% of the world who have yet to hear the name of Jesus, who are still lost. Where's God is being asked in the heart of the atheist who with their lips says there is no God, but in their heart wonders. Where's God is being asked by the woman who goes to the temple to make sacrifices for her family every day, and in the 30 years that she's done that, she's never seen anything ever change. The man who lays down on his rug 7 times a day to pray and has never once heard the voice of the Father talk back to him. The man and the woman who march in the parades in the LGBT community and yet go home to an abusive spouse because abuse happens more frequently in that community than in the heterosexual community. Want to know, where is God? 8 billion people, and 43 of them, 3%, have still not heard the word Jesus. The young woman who stands in front of a mirror and in her mind is carving off chunks of herself because she doesn't understand that she was created in the image of God. The young man who sits there with a pistol in his lap wondering, will the pain end if I kill myself, or should I take out all my classmates? They want to know, where is God? Maybe even yourself right now, inflation, post-pandemic, family problems, health issues. And you're sitting there wondering, where is God? And I'm telling you, he's right here, right now. Yes. This is why we do missions. This is why the McKennies are going to Singapore. This is why the Nesses are in Italy. This is why the Judds are in Mongolia. They were all willing to go. I am willing to go. Hallelujah. Church, will you continue to hold the rope? Yes. Pastor?